I stood there trembling, one hand reaching for balance that wasn't there, as my daughter's voice cut through the crowd. "Walk faster, Mom." The oak cane she'd snatched gleamed in her grip like proof that weakness was contagious. Around us, strangers kept smiling at pumpkins and honey jars, pretending not to see a mother left standing in the cold. After 71 years of walking beside her, I finally understood. I'd raised someone who mistook cruelty for strength. So I steadied myself and started walking, but this time, toward my lawyer's office. Before we begin, may I ask, where in this big, beautiful world are you listening from? It's always a quiet honor to know who's sharing this space. Drop it in the comments and don't forget to subscribe. The late morning sun spilled across the brick-lined streets of downtown Ashgrove, washing the farmer's market in a golden sheen that made everything feel warmer than it was. Autumn hadn't quite let go yet. Air sharp enough to cut, leaves crisp underfoot. Wooden crates spilled over with apples, pumpkins, wildflower honey in glass jars that caught the light like something sacred. Miriam shuffled along the uneven path, her custom oak cane tapping beside her in steady rhythm. Her hands, spotted, elegant, worn with time, gripped the cane like it was the last thing tethering her to the world. Every step was a negotiation between pain and pride. "Come on," Rachel snapped from ahead, tossing a glance over her shoulder, jaw clenched. "We don't have all day." Emily turned from a booth selling kettle corn, eyebrows raised. "Mom's trying," she said. Voice cautious. Rachel ignored her. Her boots clicked sharply as she strode back toward Miriam. Her eyes scanned the crowd, maybe annoyed by strangers seeing her slowed down by this burden. Without warning, she reached out and yanked the cane from Miriam's hand like it was a misplaced umbrella. "Rachel," Miriam gasped, her fingers clutching at air. Her knees buckled, the ground tilted. For one terrifying second, she teetered. Then her hand flailed out and caught the edge of a wire cart stacked with gourds. The metal clanged as she steadied herself, breath trembling, eyes wide and unseeing. Emily's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Noah, always still, stood stiffly by the booth. His gaze locked on a crate of heirloom tomatoes, as if looking anywhere else might make it disappear. Rachel didn't flinch. "Walk faster." "But, Mom," she said through her teeth, holding the cane like it offended her. Miriam stood motionless. Her hand trembled against the cart. She didn't look at Rachel, didn't look at anyone. She just adjusted the shoulder of her beige cardigan and quietly reached for the cane. Rachel didn't give it back, not right away. She stood there, towering above her mother, nostrils flared, like this was some battle of wills. People passed around them, laughing, carrying sunflowers and fresh bread, oblivious to the scene hardening in the middle of the market like a bruise. Emily stepped forward. "Give her the cane, Rachel." But Rachel didn't move. Her thumb ran slowly over the polished curve of the wood handle, almost thoughtfully. "You could walk faster if you tried." Miriam's voice was a whisper, but it cut clean. "I've tried." The moment broke like ice cracking. Rachel shoved the cane back into Miriam's hand, harder than she needed to. "There," she muttered. "Happy?" Miriam took it without a word. Her fingers found the smooth groove worn by years of use. Comforting, familiar, she turned and kept walking. Slower now. Rachel turned away, brushing her hair back as if nothing had happened. Emily watched her, something raw behind her eyes. She didn't speak, but her stare followed Rachel like a shadow refusing to fall away. And behind them, Noah finally moved. His lips parted like he might say something, but then his shoulders sagged. And he just kept walking. None of them saw Miriam's hand tighten on the cane, the skin around her knuckles paling. None of them noticed the look she gave Rachel's back. But I did. I never forgot it. Not that day. Not ever. The waiting room smelled faintly of lemon oil and something older. Leather-bound books, maybe, or the hush of long-held secrets. A brass floor lamp cast a soft glow against cream wallpaper, and behind the receptionist's desk, a wall clock ticked so quietly it was almost rude. Miriam stepped inside without fanfare. No cane, no help, just her. Her hand hovered briefly at the doorframe before she moved forward, slow, steady, a dignified march in low heels. Her spine was upright, not from pride, but memory. She hadn't stood this way in years, not since before the surgeries. Each step cost something, but she paid it. Daniel Loeb looked up as she entered. His office, paneled in walnut, with 2 wide armchairs and a glass water decanter on a side table, felt like it hadn't changed since the Reagan years. Loeb himself was folded into a navy suit, his silver hair trimmed close, his wire-rimmed glasses perched at the edge of a face used to watching people lie. He stood. "Miriam, I won't need long," she said. He nodded once and gestured toward the armchair across from him. "You're early." "I've had time to think." She sat carefully, not frail, precise. Her hands smoothed her skirt once, then folded together. No tremble. Her voice, when it came, had the strength of a door closing. "We need to make adjustments, effective immediately." Loeb blinked. His pen stilled over a notepad. "This about Rachel?" Miriam exhaled, slow as breath through a cracked window. "No," she said. "This is about clarity." He sat back. The silence stretched. Familiar. In 30 years of managing family estates, he'd seen it all. Blood feuds dressed in holiday sweaters, betrayal tucked behind handshakes. The ugliest truths saved for deathbed signatures. But something in Miriam's posture made him set his pen down altogether. "You want to revisit the succession terms?" he asked carefully. "I want to rewrite them." He opened a folder, one he'd clearly kept within reach. Inside, the old plan, drafted in his own clean, cursive scrawl. Rachel named as executor, joint beneficiary with Emily, all standard, all approved years ago when the girls still took road trips together and sent their mother matching birthday cards. "She doesn't carry legacy," Miriam said, her voice quiet. "She carries contempt." Daniel glanced up, but Miriam wasn't looking at him. Her eyes had gone somewhere else, somewhere back. "I saw it yesterday. The weight of it," she continued. "It's not just resentment, it's rejection. Of me, of everything we built." She paused. Her fingers flexed once, then stilled. "She sees value as ownership, control, not stewardship, not family." Daniel didn't interrupt. He just waited. "I don't want that at the center of anything I leave behind." He reached for a fresh legal pad. "What are you thinking?" "Emily remains co-beneficiary," Miriam said. "She understands how to preserve without possession. But Rachel? A beat. She'll get what's fair, but she won't direct it. She won't hold the pen." He nodded. "An executor?" "I want someone neutral," Miriam said. "Professional. Preferably someone Rachel doesn't know." Daniel scribbled something quickly, then looked back. "This won't go unnoticed." "I'm not hiding it," she said. He gave her a long look. "Miriam, you understand what this means, don't you? Rachel's reaction." "She'll rage," Miriam finished. "She'll twist it into betrayal, and she'll make sure everyone knows it." She finally looked up, eyes locking with his. "But she already made her choices. This is me making mine." The clock ticked once, twice. "Begin drafting," she said. Daniel nodded slowly. "Today." "Today." He stood. "You want me to call a car?" "I walked in," Miriam said, rising to her feet. "I'll walk out." She took 2 steps toward the door, each one quieter than the last, but rooted, controlled. Her shadow followed her across the thick rug like it had been waiting all this time for her to move again. As her hand touched the doorknob, Daniel's voice stopped her. "She'll find out before the ink's dry, Miriam." Miriam didn't turn. "I'm counting on it." Then she stepped through the door and left it open behind her. Miriam spread the manila folder across the dining table like she was laying out a battlefield map. It was mid-morning. The house, hushed, light filtered through gauzy curtains onto the oak tabletop, where breakfast had once been a sacred ritual, where Rachel used to sit cross-legged in pajamas, demanding extra syrup. That girl was long gone, and so was the version of Miriam who tiptoed around her moods. The folder groaned open. Inside, years of careful record-keeping. Property deeds, bank statements, CD schedules, bonds, insurance documents, and a yellow legal pad with a handwritten title across the top in block letters, for Emily, for them, for peace. She began with the obvious, the Ashgrove house, mortgage long paid off, the upright Steinway Rachel had called hers since junior recital days, the 2 sets of heirloom pearls, the 401k and the Roth, the Liberty bonds her father bought in '74, now worth more than sentiment. Miriam paused and drew a careful line beside each item Rachel had ever laid claim to, whether aloud or by assumption. She circled those notes in red ink, assumed, claimed, entitled. Then she turned to the second list, a new column, titled Only Legacy. Under it, her mother's teaching scores from the public school system, brittle and annotated in fountain pen. The crystal bowl that survived the 1989 move, chipped but beloved. The cane, the Polaroids from the Maine trip, Emily, age 10, curled under Miriam's cardigan on the dock. The first check Emily ever wrote her, $42 to cover groceries in college, sent with a thank you note Miriam had never cashed. She reached for a stack of Post-its and began placing names. Emily, Emily, Emily. Miriam's handwriting was slow but deliberate. With each square of paper, she felt something come unknotted. The weight she'd carried, not of grief, but of guilt, loosened from around her ribs. She walked into her bedroom and opened the black velvet box that had always lived on her dresser. Inside, a set of bangles, 14 karat, with small ruby accents. Rachel had worn them to prom, declared them hers like a fact. They glinted now, lifeless. Miriam snapped the box shut. An hour later, she placed them in a brown paper bag and walked 3 blocks to New Hope House, the transitional shelter for women in recovery. She didn't give her name, just set the bag on the table and murmured, "For fundraising." The volunteer, a woman in a threadbare sweater, smiled like she'd just been handed a gold bar. She probably had. Back at home, the phone rang. Daniel. "Trust is the next step," he said. "We can create one now. It'll protect the estate, reduce exposure, and sidestep probate entirely." Miriam listened, nodding, her fingers tracing the grain of the dining table. "No executorship fights?" she asked. "None. Everything becomes part of the trust. You name the trustee. It's unambiguous. No loopholes. And Rachel? She'll get the notification, not the power." Miriam closed her eyes. The corner of her mouth lifted, barely. "Draw it up," she said. "Tomorrow." By late afternoon, the sun had begun to sink low behind the birches outside the living room window. She sat in the armchair by the fireplace, wrapped in the silence of her decision. The door creaked open behind her. Ruth entered without knocking, Miriam's oldest friend, once a neighbor, now something like family. A former nurse with eyes that missed nothing and a mouth that rarely wasted breath. She carried 2 coffees in mismatched mugs and handed one over without a word. Miriam took it, warm in both hands. "You did it," Ruth said after a moment, eyes on the fireplace. "I had to." "I know." Ruth looked over. "Still, that girl." Miriam didn't answer. "She doesn't want your absence, Miriam," Ruth continued. "She wants your time." Miriam turned, slow. "She wants my time," she said, voice edged. "But not my presence." Their eyes met. Nothing flinched. "I spent too long thinking they were the same." Ruth let that settle. Then she reached into her coat and pulled out a small folded newspaper clipping. "I figured you might want to see this," she said. She placed it gently on the side table. Miriam unfolded it. There. In ink, Loeb and Associates welcomes new junior partner, Rachel L. Morton. She read it twice, once for the shock, and again for what it meant. The fireplace cracked. Outside, the wind shifted. Inside, the floor beneath everything began to move. Just enough to warn her. Rachel wasn't standing still either. And she was closer than Miriam thought. The china clinked softly as Miriam set the teacup on the tray. Bone-white porcelain rimmed in silver, the kind reserved for company that mattered. She moved without hurry, without apology. The kettle hissed, and the faint scent of Earl Grey drifted through the room like smoke from a long-doused fire. Rachel sat stiffly in the armchair across from the fireplace, crossing and uncrossing her legs. Her heels clicked each time they hit the floor, sharp and nervous. "It's been busy," Rachel said, her voice pitched a little too high. "New responsibilities, lots of client transitions. Loeb's office has been growing. It's good. It's really good." Miriam nodded once. No smile. She poured the tea in careful silence. Rachel's eyes flicked around the room like she was scanning for signs of collapse. There was none. The mantel was clean. The piano gleamed. A new orchid bloomed on the sill. "You know," Rachel continued, "I've been meaning to come by. Just check in. See how things are going." She smiled, wide, performative. "I worry sometimes. The house, the bills, all the little things. They can pile up." Miriam placed the second teacup in front of her daughter. "I manage quite well," she said. Rachel's smile stiffened. Of course you do." She didn't pick up the tea. Instead, she leaned forward slightly, elbows on her knees. "I just mean, if you ever needed help with managing things, accounts, upkeep, long-term planning, I'm here. I mean, we're here, as a family." Miriam took a slow sip of her tea, her eyes never leaving Rachel's. "That's generous," she said, "if I were in need." There was no edge in her tone, just a kind of finality that left no space for further reaching. Rachel shifted again, her blouse rustling against the chair's fabric. Her gaze swept the room once more and landed, almost too casually, on the writing desk near the front window. A stack of fresh estate folders sat neatly there, each bound in Loeb's signature navy blue with silver embossed lettering. The edge of one bore a yellow sticky note in Miriam's handwriting. Rachel's voice faltered. "New paperwork?" Miriam followed her gaze. A small pause. Then, without drama, she rose and walked to the desk. She slid a notepad on top of the folders. No rush, no alarm, just the quiet movement of someone entirely unbothered. "Organizing?" Miriam said over her shoulder. "Some old things, some new." Rachel's eyebrows lifted just slightly. "I just want to know what to expect," she said, her voice lower now, measured. Miriam returned to her seat, tea in hand. "Then you'll need patience." Rachel stared at her. The silence pulled tight between them, the air in the room too still. A car horn blared faintly from down the block. The clock on the mantel ticked on, oblivious. Rachel stood. "I didn't come here to fight," she said. "I came because I care." Miriam's eyes narrowed, barely. "No," she said softly. "You came because you're afraid I've started making decisions without you." Rachel flushed. "That's not true." Miriam stood as well, slower. She didn't raise her voice. "I've spent a lifetime giving you access, Rachel. Not one day of it was ever enough." Rachel looked toward the door, her jaw clenched. "I'm still your daughter." "And I still drink my tea hot," Miriam replied. "Yet here we are." Rachel turned and strode toward the entryway. Her heels hit the hardwood with too much force, as if she wanted the floor to remember she'd been there. At the door, she paused, her hand on the knob. "When the time comes," she said without turning, "don't expect me to wait in the dark." Miriam didn't flinch. "I won't," she said. "You'll be looking for a light switch I already removed." Rachel opened the door and stepped out into the cold, letting it slam shut behind her. The silence afterward was clean, lighter somehow. Miriam picked up the untouched tea from Rachel's cup and poured it down the kitchen sink. She stood there for a long moment, her hand braced against the counter, the wind just beginning to rattle the windows. And then, the mail slot clinked. She turned. One envelope, Loeb and Associates, addressed not to her, but to Rachel L. Morton, delivered to the wrong house. The wind had died down, but the cold clung to the sidewalk like it knew it still had a role to play. Miriam walked slowly, her coat buttoned to the top, gloved hands tucked neatly into her pockets. Beside her, Emily matched her pace without comment. No rushing, no reaching to help, just there, present. They passed the post office, the bookstore with the crooked local authors sign in the window, and the dentist's office that had been there since 1982. Still run by the same man with too many framed diplomas and not enough Novocaine. Halfway down Main Street, they reached the bakery. The window was fogged up, soft light glowing behind rows of cinnamon rolls and braided challah. The bell above the door jingled as they stepped inside. The warmth hit immediately, sugary and real, the kind that wrapped around you without asking permission. Miriam exhaled like she hadn't realized she'd been holding her breath. Emily held up 2 fingers to the teen behind the counter, who already knew what to box up. "Still the peak and pinwheels," she said with a smile. "Always," Miriam murmured. They didn't sit inside, just took the white paper bag and walked back out, steam still rising from the bag, like it held something holy. After a block of silence, Miriam spoke. I'm making some changes. To the estate, Emily looked over, calm. All right. I'm not doing it out of spite, Miriam said. Not revenge. Just correction, based on respect. Emily nodded once. That's fair. You don't want to know what's in it? I want to know that you're okay, Emily said. And that you're doing what feels right. I just want to be around. They walked another half block before Miriam stopped beside the old iron bench outside the hardware store. She sat down carefully, and Emily didn't hesitate. She joined her, letting the bag of pastries rest between them. Miriam reached into her coat and pulled out a single folded sheet of paper. Daniel finalized the trust this morning, she said. You're the sole beneficiary. More than that, you're the steward. The trust will fund music scholarships at Ash Grove High and mobility aid programs for women over 60. It's all outlined. The home, the accounts, even the piano. Emily looked at the page but didn't reach for it. Her eyes welled. You didn't have to, she whispered. I know, Miriam said, but I wanted to. They sat like that for a moment, no dramatics, no declarations. Just two women on a cold bench in a quiet town, caught in the space between loss and grace. Miriam turned her head, watching the afternoon sun cut through the clouds in long, slanted beams. When I was younger, she said, I thought legacy meant keeping everything in the family. But families don't keep. They break, rebuild, disappear. What stays is what we give away with purpose. Emily finally reached for the paper. Her hand trembled as she took it. I don't know what to say. Then don't, Miriam replied, her voice soft but steady. Just live in a way that proves I was right about you. Emily blinked hard, then nodded. I will. They stood together, folding back into their slow rhythm. A rhythm chosen, not imposed. As they reached the corner, Miriam touched Emily's arm gently. I need to mail something, she said. You go on ahead. You sure? Miriam smiled faintly. I won't get lost between here and the mailbox. Emily gave her a hug, warm, brief, real, and walked off with the pastries in hand. Miriam turned and walked one block down. She stopped at the blue mailbox and pulled a thick envelope from her coat pocket. It was the misdelivered letter from Loban Associates, the one addressed to Rachel. She hadn't opened it. Not yet, but her thumb hovered over the seal for a long moment. Then, she slipped it into the box. The metal clanked as it disappeared, but as she turned to walk away, something made her pause. Across the street, parked half out of view behind the florist's van, sat a dark gray Audi. Inside it, Rachel sat behind the wheel, sunglasses on, motionless, watching. It was 2:14 a.m. when Miriam's phone buzzed on the nightstand. She blinked awake, the glow from the screen cutting through the dark. Her eyes adjusted slowly before the name came into focus. Ruth. The text was short, a single link. You should see this. Miriam hesitated before tapping. Rachel's social media page loaded slowly, the blue light washing the room in cold illumination. The post at the top was time-stamped 1 hour ago. A photo, Rachel holding a champagne flute, arm slung over a colleague's shoulder. The caption read, Some inherit what's earned. Others steal what's left behind. 100 likes, 24 comments, not a single mention of names. But every word aimed like a knife. Miriam didn't flinch. She didn't even sigh. Instead, she took a screenshot, then another, capturing the timestamp and the comment thread below. Her reflection, faintly visible in the glass, stared back at her with an unreadable calm. She swiped to her email and attached the images, typing slowly. To Daniel Loeb. Subject behavioral documentation. Rachel Morton body for records. More to follow. Then she hit send. A few minutes later, she opened her filing cabinet. The middle drawer slid open with a soft metallic sigh. A row of folders, neat, color-coded, labeled in her firm, slanted handwriting. One stood out. Behavioral patterns. Rachel. She slipped the screenshots inside, pressing the tab closed with the flat of her palm. The gesture wasn't angry, it was ritual. Final. When the phone buzzed again, it was Daniel. Daniel. Got the files. If she contests later. This helps, Miriam. I expect she will, Daniel. You always did plan ahead. Miriam. Planning is just remembering what patterns look like. The next morning, Miriam's house was filled with quiet purpose. Papers spread across the table. Legal forms, copies of IDs, notary seals waiting to be stamped. Colleen, the local notary and part-time librarian, sat opposite her, glasses perched low on her nose. "All healthcare proxy revisions here?" she asked, tapping the signature line. "Yes," Miriam said, sliding the page forward. "Rachel is to be removed. Ruth is to be added, effective immediately." Colleen nodded. Understood. The rhythmic thump of her seal pressing into paper echoed softly through the kitchen. Miriam initialed each page, deliberate and calm. Colleen, ever discreet, glanced once at her. "You sure about this?" Miriam looked up, her gaze steady. "She's my daughter," she said, "but Ruth is the one who stays when it rains." By the time Colleen gathered her bag, the documents were bound, notarized, and placed neatly beside Miriam's leather portfolio. The room smelled faintly of ink and resolve. When the door shut behind Colleen, the silence felt heavier than before, almost intimate. Miriam stayed seated, staring at the small stack of papers that now dictated who would speak for her if she couldn't. She reached for a new sheet of stationery, the good kind, the one embossed with her initials. She uncapped her fountain pen and began to write in her practiced, careful hand. Why I chose to disappear from her documents. There are things a mother teaches through presence and others through removal. Rachel learned from my giving. Now she'll learn from my absence. This is not vengeance. It's an education in boundaries. When she searches for her name and doesn't find it, she'll understand what silence can cost. She let the ink dry, then folded the letter once, twice, slid it into an envelope addressed in her neat script. To be opened only if contested. She added it to the file drawer with the same precision as before, one slow, deliberate motion, and closed it firmly until it clicked. The house was still. Outside, a car passed down the street, tires whispering against wet pavement. For a long moment, Miriam sat motionless, her reflection mirrored in the dark window. Then, from across the street, headlights flared, briefly, and vanished. Miriam didn't move. She didn't need to see who it was. She already knew. The clinic sat at the end of a tree-lined cul-de-sac, discreet enough that privacy came built into the architecture. Frost still glazed the edges of the glass door when Miriam arrived. The receptionist, young, polite, all soft vowels, handed her a clipboard. "Cognitive evaluation and emotional wellness screening," she said. "Take your time." Miriam smiled faintly. "I don't need much." She filled the forms in block letters, her handwriting steady, unhurried. Under reason for visit, she wrote simply, "Voluntary evaluation, personal and legal clarity." By 10 a.m., she was seated across from Dr. Howard Cleary, a neurologist with an expression honed by years of listening to families whisper about decline. The office smelled faintly of antiseptic and carpet cleaner. Diplomas lined the wall in perfect symmetry. Dr. Cleary adjusted his glasses. "You understand this isn't required, Mrs. Morton?" "I do," Miriam said. "I prefer documentation over rumor." He smiled, almost approvingly. "Let's begin." The test was standard: names, numbers, recall patterns. She recited the date, the current president, the zip code she'd memorized in 1978. When asked to draw a clock face showing 10 past 11, her pen didn't tremble. The circle was crisp, the numbers evenly spaced. She shaded the hands exactly where they belonged. After an hour of quiet questions, Dr. Cleary set his pen down. "You're remarkably lucid." "I should hope so," she said dryly. He leaned forward, elbows on his desk. "You mentioned legal clarity, someone questioning your competency." Miriam met his eyes, calm and clear. "Not yet, but someone will." He nodded once, understanding without prying further. "You'll have the full report by this afternoon." That evening, the email arrived. She printed it immediately, 6 pages, detailed and clinical. Subject: Cognitive and Emotional Competency Report. Miriam J. Morton, age 71. The conclusion was unambiguous. No evidence of cognitive decline, impairment, or suggestive indicators of diminished capacity. Patient demonstrates full awareness, memory retention, and executive reasoning beyond normative range for age group. Miriam stapled the report to a cover sheet and slid it into her estate binder. Another proof, another wall. When she called Daniel, his voice carried quiet satisfaction. Impeccable, he said. No court would dare overturn this. They can question love, Miriam replied, but not logic. Daniel chuckled under his breath. Remind me never to underestimate you. Most people already have, she said, then hung up. Later that night, the house hummed with faint winter static, pipes groaning, branches scraping the siding. Miriam sat at her writing desk, a journal open in front of her, cream pages, blue ink. Each entry began the same way. Dear Emily, you should know that legacy is not a gift. It's an argument that outlives its participants. You'll find letters like this one if you look for them, but not all at once. They're meant to appear slowly, like truth does. She wrote until her wrist ached, the script looping and elegant. On the final line, she hesitated, then added, She'll tell you I was confused. Don't believe her. Confusion was always her weapon, not mine. She closed the book gently, her fingertips brushing the leather cover like it was something alive. A knock came at the side door. It was Ruth, hat pulled low, scarf tucked tight. She stepped inside, stamping out the cold. You were up late, Ruth said. I saw the light. I was writing, Miriam replied. Ruth hung her coat and eyed the papers spread across the desk. All this proof, doctors, lawyers, signatures. You think she won't twist it anyway? She'll try, Miriam said. But twisting facts only shows who's afraid of them. Ruth studied her for a long moment. Then quietly, she wants to rewrite you into history. Miriam looked up from her notes, a faint smile forming. And you, Ruth added, just rewrote her out of legacy. The words landed soft but heavy, like snowfall that wouldn't melt. Miriam leaned back in her chair, the lamplight catching the thin silver of her hair. Outside, a shadow crossed the frost-glazed window, quick, uncertain. The motion light flared once, flooding the yard in sterile white. But when Miriam turned to look, the space was empty. Only her own reflection stared back, and for the first time, she couldn't tell who was watching whom. Daniel's reply landed like a gavel drop. 2. Rachel L. Morton. Subject: Trust Inquiry. Response: Ms. Morton, you are not a trustee. You are not a beneficiary. You have no legal standing to request changes, disclosures, or direction concerning the Morton Family Trust. All inquiries going forward must be submitted through formal counsel. Regards, Daniel R. Loeb, Escasset Managing Partner. Loeb and Associates. Miriam read it once, then twice. Not for the content she already knew, but for the tone. There was no malice in it. Just precision like a scalpel. By the following morning, Rachel's response came through Daniel's office. A cease and desist threat cloaked in legalese and grievance. Accusations of coercion, claims of diminished capacity, demands for full financial disclosures, a paragraph accusing Ruth of undue influence. Daniel forwarded it with a single note. As expected, she's not testing the walls, she's pounding on them. Miriam sat at her kitchen table, sunlight cutting across her tea like a thin blade. She said nothing, just opened her folder labeled Legal Strategy, Final, slid in the printout, and moved to the next step. Daniel was already a step ahead. Within 48 hours, Rachel received a sealed packet. Inside, a full copy of the notarized competency evaluation. Digital timestamps of all trust and proxy updates. Notarized letters of intent signed over 3 separate meetings. A formal statement from Colleen, the notary, affirming Miriam's mental clarity during each document signing. A signed notice declaring any further contact from Rachel to Miriam would violate pending legal boundaries. It was, in short, airtight. By the end of the week, Miriam sat across from Daniel in his office as he slid one final paper toward her. This is a no-contact clause, he said. If you include it within the trust instructions, it formalizes everything. No direct communication, no phone calls, no visits. From this point on, everything goes through me or a court. Miriam picked up the pen without hesitation. She signed in clean, fluid strokes. Her hand didn't tremble. When she finished, she exhaled, long and quiet, as if releasing something old that no longer had permission to live in her lungs. Daniel nodded. We'll record it immediately. That afternoon, Miriam changed the locks. A contractor from Brookside Home Security arrived just after lunch. Young, polite, and careful not to comment when she handed him a printed list of updates. New deadbolts, smart camera installation on all doors and eaves, motion sensors by the side gate, a new keypad system at the fence line with a randomized rolling code. Do you want the old access log wiped? He asked. Yes, Miriam said. Wipe everything. By nightfall, the house had become its own kind of vault. Quiet, sturdy, alert. The flicker of new camera LEDs glowed faint red in the corners of the windows. Ruth arrived with groceries and stood quietly by the door as Miriam keyed in the new entry code. You think she'll try to get in? Ruth asked. Miriam didn't look up. I think she always assumed she already had. She let Ruth in and rearmed the system behind her. The beep of the keypad was low but final. Later, in the den, Ruth watched as Miriam cataloged the security updates into a folder marked Personal Protections. Never thought it'd come to this, Ruth said. I always knew it might, Miriam replied. She paused, then looked out the window into the dark. When Rachel was little, she said, she'd hide under the dining table when she felt left out. Wouldn't cry, wouldn't speak, she just stared, like waiting for the world to remember her. Ruth said nothing, just waited. She's not under tables anymore, Miriam said. Now she watches from parked cars and posts captions with teeth. Then, softly, she still believes the house is hers. Ruth placed a hand on her shoulder. She can believe whatever she wants. Miriam nodded once. But even as they sat there, something shifted, a shadow near the mailbox, just outside the beam of the motion lights. Not close, not far. Miriam rose and pressed the remote to activate the perimeter camera. The screen in the hallway flickered to life. The mailbox was empty, but a single sheet of paper fluttered in the winter wind, caught against the iron fence. Ruth moved to the door. Want me to get it? Miriam shook her head. I will. She stepped outside. The cold stung instantly. Sharp, immediate. She walked to the gate and peeled the paper from the iron. Typed, unsigned. Folded once. It read, Legacy can be corrected too. The knock was too loud for a Tuesday morning. 3 quick thuds, sharp, deliberate, echoing through the front hall like someone trying to break through not just a door, but time itself. Miriam didn't flinch. She stood behind the door, still in her robe, tea cooling on the side table, one hand on the brass doorknob she had no intention of turning. Another knock. Louder now. Then Rachel's voice, bright and sugary, so obviously forced it curdled on arrival. Mom, it's me. No answer. I just want to talk. Through the wide-angle peephole, Miriam watched her daughter on the porch, coat slung open, phone in one hand like she couldn't decide whether to use it or throw it. Her smile was pinned on like a corsage, visible, intentional, dead. Rachel leaned in, pressing her face slightly to the door as if she could will it to transparency. Seriously, she said, her voice tightening. I don't know what all this is. Lawyers? Lock codes? What are you doing? Miriam said nothing. Not through the door, not through the cameras. Let silence do what words never could. From the side yard, a motion-activated light clicked on. Rachel turned, squinting toward the hedge line, and saw Ruth. She stood just inside the fence, wearing a knit hat and carrying a basket of folded towels. Casual, unhurried. But her steps were already pointed toward the porch. Rachel stiffened. Ruth. Ruth stepped up onto the porch, her boots quiet on the painted wood. Her voice was low, flat, and undeniably final. She's not receiving visitors. Rachel laughed once, short and disbelieving. I'm not a visitor. I'm her daughter. That title stopped meaning what you think it does. Rachel's jaw clenched. This is insane. You think I'm just supposed to stand here? Get boxed out of my own family? No, Ruth said calmly. I think you were expecting to walk through a door you burned. Rachel took a half step forward. I just want to talk to her. She doesn't want to talk to you, Ruth replied. And before you accuse me of poisoning her mind, don't bother. You did that all by yourself. Rachel looked down, huffed, then shook her head. This isn't you. This is all her paranoia. Ruth nodded once. And yet, here you are, on a porch you don't belong to anymore, with no key, no invite. A long, raw beat. Rachel's tone sharpened. So what now? You're her guard dog? Ruth smiled thinly. No, I'm the person who remembers. Rachel narrowed her eyes. Remembers what? Ruth didn't blink. The cane, she said. That day at the market. You ripped it from her hand like it was trash. Rachel opened her mouth, closed it. Her face flickered, something between embarrassment and rage, dressed in disbelief. That was, she started. A choice, Ruth cut in. One of many. Rachel exhaled hard through her nose, then turned toward the door, fists clenched at her sides. I'm not the villain here, she muttered. I was just trying to help. Miriam, still standing behind the door, stared at her daughter through the thick pane of safety glass. Her tea had gone cold. Her hand hadn't moved. She let the words hang in the space between them. Help. It always came gift-wrapped in control. On the porch, Rachel gave one last knock, more out of habit than hope, then turned abruptly. Fine, she said. If this is the game we're playing now. She brushed past Ruth with clipped steps, her boots landing hard on each porch stair. Ruth watched her go, not triumphant, not angry, just resolute. At the end of the walkway, Rachel turned, eyes locking once more with the house, as if daring it to swallow her absence. Then she got into her Audi and slammed the door hard enough to make the neighbor's dog bark. Tires screeched, the car peeled off. Silence returned like snowfall. Inside, Miriam stepped back from the door, picked up her tea, and poured it gently into the sink. She walked into the study, opened her binder, and added a new page titled, Unwitnessed Visits, Logged. She noted the time, the words spoken, Ruth's role, and under outcome she wrote, did not attempt forced entry, did not apologize. But hours later, when the cameras auto-synced their footage to the cloud, one frame glitched, just briefly. In it, Rachel didn't turn away right away. She pressed something beneath the edge of the welcome mat. Something square, something sealed. Miriam didn't see it live, but the footage did. And it was already archived. Waiting. Daniel called at 9:03 a.m. sharp. Miriam had just set her tea down beside the piano and was about to play the first scale of the day when the phone buzzed against the bench. She answered on the second ring. Rachel retained counsel, Daniel said. Junior partner out of Charlottesville, requests clarity on the terms of the trust reallocation. Miriam's expression didn't change. What does that mean? It means she hired someone too green to realize he's walking into a closed case, Daniel said. Probably told him you were confused, maybe coerced. She'll tell him what makes her feel innocent, Miriam replied. Daniel hummed in agreement. I'm preparing a file, full documentation, watermarked, sealed, and time-stamped. I'll send it within the hour. Make sure it's beautiful, Miriam said softly. I want him to admire it before he withdraws. The PDF landed on the attorney's desk by noon. 47 pages. Cover page embossed with Loeb and Associates' signature gray seal. Table of contents listing. Signed competency evaluation, PP 3-6. Healthcare proxy revisions, PP 7-12. Trust redistribution breakdown, PP 13-21. Legal affidavit of intent, PP 22-25. Notary declarations, PP 2016-31. Timestamped communications, PP 32-40. Legacy statement, PP 41-44. Supplemental exhibits, annotated estate files and family history log, PP 45-47. The lawyer's reply came at 3:17 p.m. to Daniel Loeb. Subject, Morton Trust, legal standing. Thank you for your thorough response. No further action will be taken on behalf of Ms. Morton. Please consider the matter closed. Regards, Charles M. Vance, Esq. Roth and Vance Legal, LLP. Daniel forwarded the email to Miriam with the subject line. He blinked. Miriam read it, smiled faintly, then closed the laptop. The sunroom had warmed slightly by late afternoon. The snow outside melted in patches along the brick path, and filtered light spilled in soft across the floorboards, catching the edge of the Steinway's polished wood. Miriam sat down and flexed her fingers. Her left knuckle still swelled in cold weather, but the scales came back like memory, firm, clean, unhurried. C major, G, F, D. Each note spilled through the sunlit room like a quiet reclamation. She didn't hear the front door open, but she felt the shift, the familiar presence. Emily stepped into the room without announcement, a pastry box in one hand, scarf trailing down her shoulder. "You left the gate open," she said, placing the box on the windowsill. "I know," Miriam said without looking up. Today felt safe. Emily walked over and sat on the bench beside her, their knees brushed lightly. She placed her hands on the keys, tentative, a little unsure. "Still remember your part?" Miriam asked. "Enough to embarrass myself," Emily replied. They began, 2 parts, 1 song. The same duet they'd practiced the summer Emily turned 12. Miriam had taught her by touching the backs of her fingers, guiding each phrase, saying nothing unless correction was necessary. Now they moved in tandem, one melody line weaving into the other. Imperfect, but sincere. At the end, the last note hung in the room longer than either of them expected. Emily exhaled. "I missed that." "You came back to it," Miriam said. They sat in the quiet. Then Emily reached into her pocket and pulled something out. A letter came, addressed to me, from Rachel. Miriam's fingers froze on the keys. "She's trying a new tone," Emily continued, almost nostalgic. "Says I'm caught in your manipulations, that we could still be a family again if I help her." Miriam turned, calm but sharp. "And what did you do with it?" Emily smiled softly. "I put it in your mailbox. Figured it belonged in your archive." Miriam laughed once, low and real. "Good girl." Emily leaned her head against her mother's shoulder. "You taught me how to play the hard notes," she said. "And you," Miriam replied, "learned how to let the wrong ones fade." But later that night, after Emily had gone and the piano lid had been closed, Miriam walked out onto the porch with a flashlight in hand. She knelt by the mat, lifted it. The square envelope Rachel had slipped there days earlier was still sealed, its edge slightly warped by melted snow. She picked it up, carried it inside, set it on the dining table, and walked away. She didn't open it, not yet, but the house could feel it now. Waiting. The article ran on a Sunday, page B3 of the Ash Grove Gazette, nestled between a feature on local veterans and a puff piece about the town's upcoming winter market. But there it was, full color, quarter page. "Restoring Voice, the Miriam Keller Fund puts music back in the hands of seniors." A photograph sat beneath the headline. Miriam in profile, seated at her Steinway, one hand resting gently on the keys. Emily stood behind her, smiling, not at the camera, but at her mother. In the background, sunlight streamed through the window in long golden ribbons, the piano gleaming like it had waited decades for this exact frame. The piece was straightforward, respectful. A retired teacher, lifelong musician, and recent founder of a local trust dedicated to empowering seniors through music education and mobility aid. No mention of Rachel. No whiff of family drama. Just legacy, purpose, and grace. By noon, the online version had been shared 37 times. Rachel saw it before her second espresso. She clicked through the link twice, once on her laptop, again on her phone, as if it might read differently in another format. It didn't. Miriam, pictured, quoted, praised. And Emily, standing beside her like it had always been this way. Rachel opened her phone camera, tried to take a selfie, deleted it. Then opened Instagram and began typing into the black and white story frame. Funny how some people build legacies by pretending everyone else never existed. Manipulation is still manipulation, no matter how good the lighting is. She tapped post. 3 minutes later, the story had 17 views and 1 reply. From Ruth. No filter, no profile photo. Just a single message in response. "She's more lucid than you've ever been." Rachel didn't reply, but she didn't delete it either. Miriam sat at the kitchen table, the printed newspaper folded neatly beside her coffee mug. She didn't linger on the photo, or the headline, or even the quote the reporter had chosen to end with, "Music is where memory becomes a gift again, not a burden." Monsieur Keller. She read it once, then folded the paper shut, but her hand rested on top of it, lightly, like she wasn't quite ready to let go of the moment. Not yet. The house was still. No knocks, no distant engines idling, only the faint ticking of the clock above the stove and the soft hiss of the radiator warming the floor beneath her feet. She took a sip of coffee. It was hot, bitter, perfect. Then the email dinged. Subject: New applications, Miriam Keller Fund. from scholarshipsashgrovearts.org. She opened it. 37 submissions. In just under 48 hours. Names, ages, essays, voice memos. One application included a scanned photo, an older man holding a harmonica, handwritten note. My hands don't work like they used to, but the music's still in my head. Miriam blinked once, then again. Her hand moved slowly toward her notebook, flipped to a fresh page, and began listing names. Not all 37, just the first 3. Then paused. Then added a fourth. A knock at the door made her jump, but it was Emily again, with 2 lattes and a grin that said she'd seen the paper too. You're famous, she said, setting the drinks down. I'm funded, Miriam replied, smiling into her cup. They both laughed, but across town, Rachel sat in her parked car, engine off, screen glowing in her lap. She stared at the photo on the Gazette's website, zooming in, then out. She reached for her phone again. This time, she didn't post. She recorded. A voice memo. Short, clipped. You can erase me from your documents, from your house, your piano, even your headlines, but not from history, and not from what's mine. She saved it. Didn't send it. Not yet. But the file had a title. Correction, Draft 1. The complaint arrived sealed in a manila envelope. Courier delivered to Daniel's office with all the subtlety of a threat disguised as stationery. Rachel's name was typed in bold across the top of the formal filing. Morton Veer Keller Fund. Unauthorized use of family identity, legacy, and likeness. Daniel scanned the first page once, then again. Then reached for the intercom. Deb, send it back, he said flatly. Deb's voice crackled through. With a note? With a record. Within the hour, he drafted a response that landed with the precision of a closing argument and the chill of a frost warning. To whom it may concern. Attached, please find the following materials. Founding registration of the Miriam Keller Fund. Sole business license under Miriam J. Keller. Trademark filings for fund name, logo, and affiliated program titles. Copyright ownership for all published content, including interviews and likeness. Email chain and signed letter from the Ashgrove Gazette granting publication rights. Legal affirmation that no Morton family business, brand, or estate asset was used or referenced in any way. All rights, use cases, and public-facing elements are lawfully registered under Miriam Keller, acting independently and with verified capacity. Daniel R. Loeb, S.K. The packet was 92 pages. Rachel's complaint was dismissed in less than 2 days. No hearing, no discovery, no merit, and no appeal filed. A week later, the invitation arrived via email. Simple, elegant. Letterhead from Ashgrove University's Community Ethics Lecture Series, Legacy Without Permission. A conversation with Miriam Keller. On family autonomy and public reclamation of personal history. Open to the public. RSVP required. Emily printed the email and left it on the kitchen table next to Miriam's breakfast plate. No comment, just the faintest hint of a grin tucked into the corner of her mouth as she poured her coffee. Miriam picked it up, scanned it silently. They want me to speak, Emily nodded. They should want you to teach. The auditorium was modest, 100 seats, tops, but full. Local reporters in the back, professors up front, town residents and former students dotting the rows in between. A few held printed copies of the Gazette profile like programs. Miriam stood at the lectern in a slate gray blazer, hair pulled back neatly, posture straight but relaxed. Emily sat front row, notebook in lap, phone silenced. Her presence felt like an anchor. I want to begin with a sentence you may have heard before, Miriam said, voice calm, even. Silence is a right. But dignity is a decision. The room held still, listening, not waiting. I've spent the last year reclaiming the right to speak without permission, and more importantly, the right to not speak when it serves no one, especially when the voices demanding explanation are the very ones who refused understanding. She paused. Not for applause, just breath. Legacy isn't inherited, it's built, not with names, but with values, not by proximity, but by proof. No one stirred. She looked up again, and I do not owe the use of my name, or the weight of my work, to anyone who treated me like a placeholder. Emily blinked hard. The audience rose at the end. Not loud, not frenzied, but genuine. A long, rising wave of standing gratitude. Later, as the crowd trickled out and the lights dimmed, Miriam gathered her notes quietly. A woman from the back, white hair, blue scarf, trembling hands, approached to say thank you. Another placed a folded letter into her hand and walked away without a word. Emily wrapped an arm around her mother's shoulder. "You did that?" Miriam looked around the quieting auditorium. "No," she said softly. "I just stopped letting it be taken." But across town, in a private browser tab Rachel hadn't closed, a new document had just finished uploading. It wasn't a legal claim. It wasn't a social media rant. It was a manuscript. Title page, Unmothered. The Story of Inheritance, Silence, and Survival by Rachel L. Morton. And on page 1, just 4 words. She left me first. It was raining the morning she signed the donation papers. Not hard, just steady, thin rain that beaded across the window of Daniel's conference room and ran down in single, unbroken trails. Miriam watched them slide toward the sill while the notary arranged the folders. Her compositions, every draft, sketch, and margin note she'd ever written, were being transferred to the Ash Grove Public Archive. 72 pieces, 4 decades of music, all leaving her hands that day. Daniel stood at the far end of the table, his suit immaculate as always, but softer now, more human than the first time she'd walked into his office. He didn't need to tell her what this meant. They both knew. "Everything's ready," he said quietly. "Once you sign, the archive assumes legal stewardship." Miriam nodded once, then adjusted her glasses. "Emily and Ruth's names are included?" He smiled faintly. "Co-stewards of your creative estate, authorized for reproduction and educational use. They'll oversee any requests or exhibitions." She looked down at the top sheet. Donation and Retention Agreement. Section 5B, Legacy Rights. Her name printed neatly across the top. Miriam E. Keller. Underneath it, 2 more, Emily Keller, Ruth Tannen. Miriam signed in slow, deliberate strokes. Her pen moved as if carving something clean out of stone. When she finished, Daniel collected the pages and slid them into the folder marked Keller, Archive Transfer. His movements were careful, reverent almost. Then he produced one final document, this one slimmer, bound in soft gray cardstock. "Your final directives," he said. "I incorporated your notes from last month." Miriam leaned forward, scanning the text. Her own words looked foreign now, decisions she'd already made staring back at her with unflinching clarity. Burial site. Local cemetery. West Slope. Simple marker. Name only. No date inscription. No executor from immediate family. Beneath it, the final clause. "Rachel Keller is to be formally notified upon my passing. Notification required. Involvement prohibited." Miriam's pen hovered for a moment before touching down again. She signed and set the pen beside the file. The faintest exhale escaped her chest, a sound closer to peace than fatigue. Daniel closed the folder and rested his hand on top of it. "That's the last lock, Miriam," he said. "No door left open." She looked past him, out the rain-streaked window, where a single ray of light had begun to break through the gray. "Good," she said softly. "I've walked far enough." That evening, she stopped by the Ash Grove Art Center. The building was empty, lights dimmed for the night, but the gallery still carried the warm, faint scent of wood polish and paper. In the corner, the display case waited. Her cane stood upright inside it, oak shining under the glass. The brass initials MEC caught the low light, reflecting it in soft golden arcs across the walls. Next to it hung the new announcement poster for the center's next installation, the Keller Archive, A Life in Measure and Motion, curated by Emily Keller and Ruth Tannen. She reached out, resting her palm against the cool surface of the glass. Her reflection folded into the cane's curve, an image inside an image, impossible to separate. Behind her, footsteps approached. Ruth appeared in the doorway, a clipboard tucked beneath one arm. "I thought you'd come," she said. "You always circle back once it's real." Miriam turned, her expression soft. "It's strange, isn't it? Giving everything away to keep it safe," Ruth smiled. "Not strange, just the only kind of control that lasts." They stood in silence for a while, 2 women watching an artifact of defiance turned legacy. When Ruth finally left, Miriam lingered another minute. She slipped a folded note from her pocket and taped it to the side of the glass, just beneath the brass initials. This cane once helped me walk through pain. Now it stands for the distance I refuse to let define me. Back at home, she poured herself a cup of tea and opened her journal. The pages were almost full now, spidery handwriting layered over weeks of mornings, midnights, and everything in between. She turned to the last blank sheet and wrote slowly, "The name she took from me, I reclaimed by walking past it." And in the end, I realized, what's left behind isn't what's lost. It's what I chose to leave. The pen bled slightly into the paper, leaving a thin halo around each letter. She closed the book, pressed her palm flat against the cover, and whispered almost to herself, "Enough." But across town, Rachel sat at her computer, scrolling through an online announcement she hadn't been tagged in. Ashgrove Archive acquires works of local composer Miriam Keller. Public access opens next month. She scrolled faster. Her jaw tightened. At the bottom of the article, a single photo loaded. The cane and glass, brass initials catching the light. Rachel leaned back in her chair, her reflection flickering on the screen. Then she clicked New Document. Title, Inheritance, Revised. And beneath it, she began to type. The letter had no return address, just Miriam's name written in pen, not typed. The handwriting was unfamiliar. Tight loops, slanted forward like it had something to outrun. She opened it at the kitchen table, alone, light pouring in through the windows, casting narrow shadows across her coffee. The date on the top corner made her blink. One day after the farmer's market, the cane day. Inside were just 3 lines. She took your cane, but I walked into freedom. I never forgot that moment. No signature, no explanation, but Miriam didn't need one. She recognized the voice beneath the paper. Even if the pen wasn't Emily's, it was someone else who'd been there that day, watching, unseen. Someone who understood that moment wasn't about support or weakness or mobility. It was about control. And the end of it. She folded the letter and slid it into her journal. Then she stood up and walked into the study. At the far end of the room, beside a framed print of the Maine coastline, was a tall glass case. Inside it, the cane, polished oak, still elegant, still strong. But now its smooth handle bore something new. Inlaid into the top curve, delicate brass initials, Miriam Eileen Keller. The work had been done by a craftsman from upstate, small batch artisan, hand tools only, no machinery. Miriam had sent the cane to him months ago, with a short note. "I once held this out of necessity. Now I preserve it as a symbol. Please make it mine." He had. Now it stood like a sculpture, displayed upright, protected but unhidden, inside the Ashgrove Arts Center, the official headquarters for the Keller Fund. Beneath it, a simple placard had been added last week. She walked into her power. Dedicated by Emily Keller. The case stood in the entryway, just beside the front desk, where applicants would walk by and pause before heading in to meet the board. Some would ask who she was. Some would already know. Miriam returned home that evening, the air crisp and clean, the kind of fall wind that made memory feel closer than it should. She poured herself a glass of red wine, moved to the writing desk in the corner of the living room, and pulled out a fresh leather-bound notebook. She opened to the first page and titled it in careful script, working title, What I Carried Before I Let Go. She hesitated, then flipped to the next line and wrote, "I spent 71 years learning how to carry things quietly. Wait, worry, women like Rachel. Now I write because quiet no longer serves me." She stared at the words for a long time, letting the room settle around her. Then she began sketching. Not a full outline, not yet, just anchor points, moments, questions, scenes she'd refused to narrate even to herself. She listed them in fragments. The piano Emily once asked to give up, Rachel's voice on the voicemail she never deleted. The last Thanksgiving before the cane, the moment Ruth became more than a friend outside, wind rustled through the leaves on the birch tree. Inside, Miriam kept writing. Meanwhile, across town, Rachel stood alone in her apartment, staring at a notification on her screen. Unmothered, Chapter 1 has been downloaded 88 times. She opened the stats. Most readers stopped at page 4. She scrolled through the comments. No feedback, No applause, no outrage, just silence. The story wasn't landing the way she thought it would, because it wasn't hers to tell. She shut the laptop with too much force. Back in the study, Miriam lifted the pen again, and beneath her list, wrote one final line. Just because she tried to take my cane, doesn't mean she ever learned how to stand on her own. She didn't smile, but she didn't stop writing either. The sun had begun to pull low across the hills when Miriam stepped onto the trail, the same one she used to avoid. Too uneven, too long, too far from anything resembling safety. But now, the dirt path felt familiar beneath her boots, like something that had waited patiently for her return. She moved slowly, cane in hand. Not because she needed it, but because she chose it. The brass initials glinted in the fading light. Mech. Each step was quiet, controlled. Her coat snapped lightly in the breeze, and the trees rustled above her like an audience that had finally learned how to listen. At the top of the hill, the trail bent west. She paused there, not to rest, just to look. From that angle, she could see most of Ashgrove, the bakery, the bookstore, the green tin roof of the art center where her cane now stood in glass. Everything small but not diminished. She continued walking. At the end of the trail, a wooden bench sat beneath a sugar maple in full October flare. No cameras, no plaques. No one waiting to clap or cheer. And she preferred it that way. Back home, an envelope waited by the mail slot. From Emily, no stamp. Hand-delivered. Inside, a handwritten card on heavy cream paper. You didn't just walk away. You walked ahead. Thank you for making room for me to follow, without forcing me to. Miriam placed the card on the mantel beside a photo of them at the piano. She didn't cry. Not because it didn't matter, because it finally did. Elsewhere, Ruth stood in the quiet gallery space at the Ashgrove Art Center, one arm draped in a roll of canvas, the other cradling a list of final lighting adjustments. Miriam's piano was being installed that afternoon, centered, open-lidded, beneath a soft wash of gold. The exhibit would feature sound installations, photographs, and original handwritten scores, all curated by request, all bearing the same title, Legacy in Her Key. Ruth stepped back from the blueprint and nodded to the contractor adjusting the spotlights. She's never needed a stage, Ruth said, but she damn well earned one. In a quiet corner office, Daniel Loeb leaned back in his chair and clicked the last entry in Miriam's legal folder. He reviewed every line again. Estate settled, proxy enforced, trust distributed, protections built like walls no storm could shake. With one final keystroke, he marked the file. Status, complete, protected, permanent. He exhaled, then shut it forever. That night, Miriam returned to her writing desk. A different notebook now, smaller, linen-bound. The kind you don't fill, just finish. She opened to the last page. The ink moved slowly, carefully. Freedom isn't fast, it's forward. She sat with the sentence for a long while. Then she turned to the inside of the back cover, and with the same pen, wrote what she had always known would be her final line. My daughter snatched my cane and said, "Walk faster." So I walked straight into my lawyer's office, and I never looked back. She capped the pen, closed the book, and for the first time in years, left the desk with nothing more to write.